We're at the Mishnah on Daf Mem Hey and Aleph. Learning as a supposed for Shleima Filan Chaya Baserach. Zok the Mishnah. Kachi Avdik Chavim Ein Chayav Malay Mishum Pigel Noise V'Tamei. The Avdik Chavim, a non-Jew, has the ability to be menadev or menader a carbon. You could say, I want to bring an oila. But it's not, according to the Tanakama, it doesn't have all the same restrictions. Such a carbon is treated differently than a carbon of a Jew. Ein chayav mishum pigel, if it's brought by a kohen and he has a machshavas pigel, and someone eats it, they're not going to get karas. Nicer if it was left over and eaten, which gets karas. For tamei, or eating it as a tamei, or if it becomes tamei, those things are not going to apply to a Ovid Kechavim's carbon. B'ashaychtem b'chutz, someone who brings it as a carbon b'chutz outside of the Beis Hamikdash, potter. Divrei Reb Shimon. All these things are excluded. Rabbi Yosi mechayev. However, Rabbi Yosi disagrees. He says you're going to be chayev. The Gemara is going to explain the reasons for all these things. Tanraban. Kacha Ovid Kechavim loy nenen. So this is a brisa that says these rules, it even extends these rules a little bit. It says what we said in the Mishnah plus. Not allowed to be nana from their kachim, from the carbon that Ovid Kechavim brings, but it doesn't have the din of me'ilah, meaning we have this very, very often. It means that midaraisa, there's no din me'ilah. Me'ilah is the din that you're not allowed to be nana from kachim. So that doesn't apply to a carbon brought by a non-Jew, but you still midirabanan loy nenen, you're not allowed to have hana. Which is what we just said in the Mishnah. It's not going to have those rules, are not going to apply to milchayiv kares. But another additional rule, ve'ein oisin tmura. There's a din on a carbon that if a person decides he's going to be clever and he's going to exchange his carbon with a different animal, the Torah says that, first of all, the original carbon doesn't lose its status, it doesn't become non-carbon, and second of all, the thing that you try to place the kedusha onto, it becomes kaddish with the same kedusha. But that does not apply to Ovid Kechavim's carbon. They don't bring a non-Jew cannot bring nesachim as an independent carbon, like we saw in the previous Gemara. There's nesachim that are required with certain carbonis, and then there's also an ability to bring nesachim. You could bring oil or yayin to be poured out as a carbon, as a neder, nedava, but the kohen Ovid Kechavim cannot do. Avol carbon tar nesachim. But if they bring an oil that requires to bring along with it nesachim, those nesachim are required. Divrei Reb Shimon. This is Reb Shimon Shita. Amar Rabbi Yosi. This again, this is the same machlekes like we had in the Mishnah. Rabbi Yosi says, no, all of the dinim that it says by a yid will also apply by an Ovid Kechavim. There's not going to be any difference for all these things. Bekula, he said. Shenabra bahen, lashem. Because it says on them, was the pasuk daber alam velbona velkol bnei Yisrael mat alem ish Beis Yisrael u'menager agav Yisrael sheyaku kabana lochem degachem l'chol nizerav asher yakivu laShem. All of them are laShem. That all of it mentions over there being brought by Beis Yisrael u'menager Yisrael. But it says laShem that it's all going to apply. All of the rules will apply according to Rabbi Yosi. B'medvar mamurim b'kachem mizbeach. The first din that we said in the brisa, that we said, loy nen and v'loy mayalin, that's by kachem mizbech. That means if a Ovid Kechavim is menadev, a carbon, that we said there's no din me'ilah, if someone has nana from it, that he's not going to be mechayev the din me'ilah, that's only by a carbon. Al b'kachem bed the kabayis. But if he were to say, I'm donating bricks for the binyan of the Beis Hamikdash, or even if he gives money for the Beis Hamikdash, Moelim Behen. It will have Me'ilah, which is a little counterintuitive, right? Because Kache Mizbeach is normally a higher level of Kedusha than Kache Bedek Habayis. But on the other hand, if you would look at it that you could look at it the other way, that when a non-Jew, Eved Kechavim, tries to bring a carbon, it's not a regular carbon. But when he makes a donation, that's a regular donation. Money is a universal language. You give money, that's fully accepted. So loy nanin v'loy ma'ilin. So the first thing we said is loy nanin v'loy ma'ilin in the brisa. Loy nanin midrabanan v'loy ma'ilin. We said the loy nanin is midrabanan. That which says no me'ilah on a avid kechavim carbon. The gama me'ilah chet mitruma. We learn me'ilah. It says the lashon me'ilah by me'ilah of chet. Nefesh kisimol ma v'chata b'shgaga mikache Hashem be'evias Hashem ayel tam and atzayin v'arkas shkol b'shekel hakadosh l'Hashem. What does it say? Chet. Did I read it wrong? Nefesh kisimol ma v'chata. Right. Sorry, v'chata. Right. And chet, it says in the next Sham Rishmashati will yisu as all of chet. So we learn out chet mitruma. It says by truma a lashon chet that if someone is going to be nana from truma, the betruma ksiv b'nei Yisrael v'lo avdei kechavim. And by truma it says the lashon of b'nei Yisrael. So since truma is only right, there's no truma on the produce of non-Jews. So we learn out from there to the din of me'ilah. We said there's no din of pigel noiser v'tameh. My time. Where does that come from? The asi pigel oven be noiser. We learn pigel from noiser. Asi noiser chil mituma. And we have a gzeir shava of chil to tell you noiser from tuma. Or betuma ksev b'nei Yisrael v'lo yavdei kechavim. The iser of eating karbanis betuma, right? That's a very familiar pasuk to us. So it says b'nei Yisrael, so they're excluded from tuma. Non-Jews are excluded from their karbanis are excluded from the iser, the kares for eating betuma. So and then we have a gzeir shav from that to nicer, and we have a gzeir shav from nicer to pigel. So all three of them are going to be excluded by an Ovid Kechav. Gemara says, how do we see that you don't do Tmura on an Ovid Kechavim's carbon? My timer, where does it come from? The Iskish Tmura Lamaisa Behema. The Torah has Tmura they're placed together Lagabe Maisa Behema. Rashi explains us. Tmura behema lemaisa behema Rashi dechsiv b'maisa b'ayahu utmurasai yeh. So the tmura is put together with meiser behema. Or meiser behema is because meiser dagan. That says masa min hameiser, I think. So you have the two types of trumas: the truma that you take when you separate an animal, to the truma that you have to take from your produce. Meiser dagan is b'nei Yisrael. And it says b'nei Yisrael by Meiser Dagon. So we go Meiser Dagon to Meiser Behema and Meiser Behema to Tmura. That tells you that Tmura doesn't apply to a non-Jew's carbon. These are Hekeshim. Before, when we said the Psukim, Chet, those were Gzeir Shavas. Gzeir Shava you can learn from a Gzeir Shava, but you don't learn a Hekesh from a Hekesh. So how could we make a two-step Hekesh to tell you pigel? So the Gemara. So the way it worked was, right, we said Meiser Dagan, it says B'nei Yisrael, and we learn out Meiser Behema from Meiser Dagan, and then we learn out pigel from. Tmura from Ma'aseh Behema. But this whole rule that Davar Lam Behekesh, you're not Chayzim Lam Behekesh, is only then in Kachim. So the Gemara says, Ma'aseh Dagan Chulanu. The original source was not Kachim. It was from Ma'aseh Dagan. Ma'aseh Dagan is not Kachim, it's Chulin. So therefore, you could learn it out with a hekesh from a hekesh. If it's not kachim, there's no problem with davar alam behekesh chayz v'lam behekesh. This is all good if you say in determining whether this is considered kachim. You should have the rule in ein davar alam behekesh chayz v'lam behekesh. It depends on where you're learning it out from. That we look to what is being learned out to determine whether it's treated as kachim, which would have the rule ein davar alam behekesh chayz v'lam behekesh. Ma'ikal meimer. So how are you going to learn it out? It's still a davar alam behekesh chayz v'lam behekesh, even if ma'isa dagon is chulin. Ela ma'isa behema chayve she'en kavur lo zmanhu. Ma'isa behema is that which you have to. Which your meiser, your 10th animal becomes kaddish. That's not a chayva that has a zman. The chayva she'ein lo zman kavur yisrael meisi avdei kechavim le meisi. We never find the karbanos that are not kavur zman are only relevant to yidden either kechavim le meisi. That means those things that are incumbent on a person, but which there's no chiyuv specific time to bring them, but which really is true of those that are kavur lezman as well. So it's really, the way Rashi explains it, seems to be saying more, these are things that are chayva. And a chayva is never incumbent on a guy. A guy is only could be menader or menader of a carbon. There's no such thing as him being a chatas or an asham. He's certainly not mechayiv on karbanos tzibur. So it's a little bit hard to understand why the Gemara couched it in this way, but ultimately the point is that things that chayvus are not incumbent on a guy, and therefore it's not ma'isa behema. Is that's the reason why he's excluded. So then it's only one hekesh from ma'isa behema to tmur.
So a guy can only bring an oila?
I'm not sure if he can only bring an oila, maybe a shlam and also any nedava or neder. I think so. The aim may be in the Zevachim. We said in the Brisa that they can't bring the Zevachim, but they do bring the Zevachim that are brought together with the carbon. Tanraban, Ezra. The pasuk says, excuse me. Kala Ezra Yasa Kacha it's El Lahakav Ish Ereich Michayich Lashem. Ezrach may be Nesachim, Ve'ein Oivet Kechavim may be Nesachim. In the pasuk of Nesachim, he uses the lashon Ezrach. Ezrach means a citizen, someone who's a part of the klal. So only a yid who is an Ezrach brings Nesachim, but Oivet Kechavim is not maybe Nesachim. Yachaloi Tehei Losei Tu Nesachim. I might think maybe those Nesachim that are required to accompany a carbon also an Oivet Kechavim should not be able to bring. And the Brisa had said that those nesachim they are required to bring. Talmud Laima Kacha. Torah says you should bring it. These you should bring, which is a reference that's telling us that they have to bring the nesachim that go along with the carbon. Amar Rabbi Yosi, Re'ani b'kulan lahachmer. So this is the end of the brisa. We said the list of all the things that an Oivet Kechavim does not apply to their karbanos. They don't have me'ilah, there's no pigul, and they don't make a tmura, and they don't bring nesachim. So Rabbi Yosi said, so then it ends off at the end, the brisa goes back to the din of me'ilah, and it says this din of me'ilah is only on kache mizbech. When you bring a carbon, but when Oivet Kechavim dedicates kache bedek habayis, where he gives money or he gives something to be used for the upkeep of the Beis Hamikdash, that does have a din me'ilah. So Zak Gemara, my timer, where does this come from? Kasavar ki gamra me'ilah chet mitruma. Where do we learn out me'ilah that it doesn't apply to Oivet Kechavim? We learn out the Gzeir Shava from truma. So it's dumya the truma, the kadesh kedushas that guf. So therefore, this limud that an Oivet Kechavim is excluded from me'ilah is only that kind of me'ilah that is similar to the source where we learned it out from truma. which is the Kaddish Kedushas Aguf. Our Kedushas by the Kabayis, the Kedushas Domim, like, but Kedushas by the Kabayis, which is not a Kedushas Aguf like Truma and like Hachem Mizbeach, that Ravid Kechavim, his gift will also have the din of Me'ilah. I feel slightly dyslexic whenever we have a Gemara that has both Tmura and Truma. I'm always stumbling in my mind over it. Tana Rabban, Dam Shenitma V'Zarku B'Shayig Hurtz. The Bride, did we say this? I don't think we said this in the Bride before, but we had this. But the Gemara says an exclusion if your dam that became tamei and it was thrown. This is a separate thing, really. Dam that came tamei and it was thrown. He did zrika nevertheless. If it was done b'shayge, because you really, once the dam becomes tamei, you can't continue with the avodah. But if it never, the kohen went ahead and was zayrik because he maybe didn't realize it was tamei. Hurtza. The tzitz is meratza on tuma, and this is an example that the tzitz is meratza and the carbon is valid. B'mezid, if it was done b'mezid, loy hurtza. Rashi says, it's a strange thing. Knasa d'Rabbanan hu. This is a knas midrabbanan. It's very hard for us to imagine the whole idea that you can have a d'Rabbanan. There's not so many d'Rabbanans in Kachim, because you always are stuck. If the Chacham say something is not a good carbon, then you're being mevatel Kachim. You're going to take out Kachim and throw it away. And if they say something that is not Kachim, should be Kachim, you're being chulim ba'azara, something midaraisa is chulim. So the Mefarshim explained, the Rishonim explained, it means when we say b'mezid loy hurtza midrabanan, that means we have to treat it. He gets a kapara, but he's not able to eat it. Right, like Rashi says, knas d'Rabbanan v'loy sheyavi acha. But that doesn't mean that because midrabanan was saying it's not a kosher carbon since he ate it b'mezid or he brought it b'mezid on the mizbech. It can't be that midrabanan we're going to be mevatel this kosher carbon that the tzitz was meratz on it and say that it's a possible carbon and he should bring another one. Then, like if he brought a chatas for an avera, and the Rabbanan said you weren't yaitza midrabanan, but he was midaraisa yaitza his chatas. He can't bring another chatas unless there's an avera to bring it on. You can't just bring a chatas stam, an extra chatas.
Amount that could do it for.
What'd you say? Oh, yeah, plenty backups. Eloi hurtza lahatir basa b'achila. Just means that you can't eat the basa b'achila of ba'im l'skapu. Okay. So that's what it means b'derabban. So we say b'medva mamurim b'yachid. This then that we said that b'shaygig it's hurtza b'mezid is loy hurtza by tuma. That's biyachid. Al b'tzibah bein b'shaygig bein b'mezid hurtza. The Brisa continues. However, bein b'mezid loy hurtza. Right? Obviously, there's no such thing as a carbon tzibur of avdei kechavim. It doesn't apply to them. And avdei kechavim, when they're menadev a carbon, we're saying it has a different din. Even if it's b'shaygig, it doesn't get a hartzah. Amrua Rabbanon Kameder Papa. Kaman, who is this like the like Rabbi Yaisi? This is not like Rabbi Yaisi. We had the machlekes between Rabbi Yaisi and the Rabbanon, and Rabbi Yaisi and Rabbi Shimon. And Rabbi Yaisi had said, that the goyim are treated, the carbon of a goy is treated just like that of the yid, that it's going to become tamei. So there's no difference. There would be no difference between the din of a goy and the din of a yid, and it should be b'shayig. It should be hurtza according to Rabbi Yaisi. Rabbi Yaisi am b'kulani roy lahachmer. Amlu rapapa afilu tem Rabbi Yaisi. I could even say like Rabbi Yaisi, shani hasan damakra lahem v'loy lo'avdei kechavim. I could say when the Torah said by the tzitz, that the tzitz is meratza, it says it should be meratza lahem to the yidden. V'haya al meitzas Aaron and also Aaron is avoyna kacham v'yikdishim neYisrael l'chol matnes kachem v'tzvaytam l'rotzen lahem l'fnei Hashem. Amale Rav Huna Breder of Nasan Rav Papa Elamiata Asher Hey Makdishim Hachanami. The pasuk says Dabar El Aram El Banav Yinazim Mikochim Bnei Yisrael Lichal Shem Kochim L'Gabi Tuma. It says also Asher Hey Makdishim. What's the difference between Lahem and Asher Heim? It should also mean to exclude the Avdei Kechavim. Hachanami Heim V'lo Avdei Kechavim. Rabbi Yitzi says on all of them, the Rayani Lahachman. And the Ravashi Amakra L'Rotzein Lahem. But Avdei Kechavim Labnei Hartzaninu. It's not just the Lahem, it's L'Rotzein Lahem. So that you don't have by Tumah, that's just by the Ritzu. Dr. Mishnah. Now we're going to go back. This is going back on the Mishnah before this one. When we had talked about that you only have there's certain things that are excluded from the din of pigul if it's a davar she'ein lo matirin. For example, the kaimitz or the levina or different things that there's nothing prior to it that's matter. It doesn't get a din. If someone were to eat it, he wouldn't be mechayev karas bishum pigul. Because we learn that from pasuk, there has to be a davar sheyesh lo matirin in order to be chayev pigul on it. So the Mishnah. Dvarim she'ein chayav lehem mishum pigul, although there are things that are not chayev pigul, chayav lehem mishum noiser mishum tamei, you're going to still nevertheless be chayev als noiser and als tamei. Meaning, when we talk about being chayev mishum pigul, again, we always have to repeat this. For many blot, we were talking about the requirements for something to become pigul. Now we're talking about once a carbon has become pigul, which parts of the carbon, if you eat, are you going to be chayev karas for eating it? So we said it's only a davar sheyesh lo matir, and it's only something that there's something else that made it. So if you look at it, the classic example of when you're chayev karas for eating pigul is when you eat the basar of the carbon. So you couldn't eat the basar until you brought the whole avodas hadam, and then you could eat the basar. So that's a davar sheyesh lo matir. But for example, the kaimitz, when you separate a kaimitz, there's nothing that's matter, that it's just flour and it's very edible, but there was nothing that made it kosher to eat. There's nothing you did first to make it kosher. So therefore, it's not going to have a din pigul. So the Mishnah is saying, don't think to extend that to the din of noiser. Noiser is if something was, if kachim was left over past its time, right? You're allowed to eat the basar of, let's say, of a shlamim for 2 days and 1 night. If he waited a week and then ate his basar of a shlamim, he's chayiv noiser, he's chayiv karas for that. Can't confuse noiser with pigul. Pigul is when you have a machshavas chatzluzmani. Noiser is when you actually carried it out. Well, you're laughing because how many things I'm bavarning not to get confused about it, and it's not really helping. So, mishum tamei, right? If you eat something that's tamei, again, that you're going to be chayiv, it doesn't have the same restriction, the same limitation, like we said by pigul. It's only davar sheyesh lo matirin. If you eat something that's nicer or something that's tamei, well, kachim when you're tamei, if the kachim that became tamei, you're going to be chayiv even if it's not davar sheyesh lo matirin. Chutz min hadam. However, dam you're not going to be chayiv on for eating. We're going to learn that from psukim. Reb Shimon mechayiv b'davar shedarcha lecha. Reb Shimon is mechayiv if you ate something that he limits this. That's true that you chayiv on all these things without davar sheyesh lo matirin, but that's only if it's something that's edible. Aval eitzim v'halavayna. The eitzim, you could basically bring eitzim as a carbon, or even if you just brought eitzim to burn on the mizbeach. Halavayna is the type of spice that they put on the menachas, v'aktiris, and the ktiris, the incense that was burnt on the mizbeach. Ein chalav mishum tumah. They're not edible, and you're not going to be chayiv for eating them b'tumah. There's an exclusion that things that are inedible that you eat b'tumah are potter. Tanur Rabban. We have to really explain, this Mishnah is telling us that don't think that Noiser and Tamei are going to have the same restriction as Pigul, that it's only davar sheyesh lo matirin. So the Gemara is addressing, why would I think such a thing? We had a limud by Pigul, why would we say that also extends to Tamei and Noiser? So the Gemara is going to say it's a kavachayim. I would say, I would say it's a kavachayim. Ma pigul shehu bekfiyah. ubiyadiya achas. Pigol that is not like if you remember, we learned in Shavuos that tchumi going into the Beis Hamikdash betuma and eating betuma is b'karban oila v'yared. So a pigol yichayev, a pigol is if one is over on it, he has to bring a carbon kavu, he has to bring a chatas if he does it b'shaygig. Or b'yadiya achas, and it doesn't have the din of a carbon oila v'yared that there has to be two yediyas, that he knew first that it was tamei. If you dredge this out of your memory from Shavuos, he had to first have known it was tamei, then forgotten, and then find out at the end again that it was tamei. And it's not like tuma that none of these things apply for pigel. Tuma has a heter that if Rav of Klal Yisrael is tamei, you could bring a carbon bit tuma, but there's no such heter legabe pigel. So pigel has all these things. That pigel is only restricted that you're going to be chayiv if you eat something that has matirin, tumashi ba'oila v'yared, which is more stronger than pigel. That it's ba'oila v'yared or b'shtei yediyas. I'm sorry, it has more restrictions. This ba'oila v'yared or b'shtei yediyas. V'hocher miklali. Any din she'eni chayiv el al davar sheyesh matirin bein la'adam bein l'mizbech. Since there are all these different restrictions on being chayiv for eating betuma that don't apply by pigel, so whatever restrictions there are by pigel should certainly apply by eating betuma. So that's why we need to have a pasuk, right? Our Mishnah told us this din, that there's no restriction of davar sheyesh matirin on noiser and tamei, and the reason is because otherwise I would have thought you learn it out from a Kal V'Chaimer. But now the Gemara is telling you, even though there is a Kal V'Chaimer, we have a pasuk that tells you Asher He Makdishim Li, that the Gabi Tuma, that it's only Asher He Makdishim, whatever is mukdish to me, even if it's Davar She'en Lamatir. So the Gemara Yachol Miyad. I might think that the din of Tuma applies. Now we're saying it applies even by a Davar She'en Lamatirin. So maybe it applies even before it started the whole process of becoming tuma, becoming a kachim. That means when we talk about kachim becoming tame, we're talking about a carbon. Maybe as soon as you're makdish it, the person says, I'm going to bring this animal as a carbon, and as soon as he shechs it, even before you complete the whole avoida, that the basa becomes mutar b'achila, maybe there's already a din of tuma that you're going to be chayiv karas. Tamalayma, you carve. Yes, it has to reach the status of karv. Oh, so we explain what is the drasha from Yikarv. Amar Balazav. What is it saying? I'm sorry, I skipped. That's the wrong pasuk. Amar Aleim Ludaresim Kolishasha Yikrav Mikol Zaracham Ala Kachim. Anyone who comes near Ala Kachim. Is it such a thing that a person can be chayiv just for touching? All this time we're talking about tuma. We're not talking about someone who's tummy touching a carbon. We're talking about him eating it. So what does the Torah say? B'lashon yikarev, elamatam alami yikarev, b'chochshel yikarev akasim adaber. That's something that is prepared to be brought. Yikarev doesn't mean to bring near, but it means to be brought as a carbon. Haketzad yeshloi matirin mishiyikrevu matirav. Something that is yeshla matirin, it's only going to be mechoyev tuma when the matirin were brought, that the basar became hutar la'achila. At that point, if you eat it betuma, then you're going to be chayiv. So we have to, again, not get confused. We're not saying that it has to be davar sheyesh lo matirin, but if it is a davar sheyesh lo matirin, then after the matirin was brought, at that point, it becomes hochsher that if you eat it betuma, you're going to be chayiv. Ein la matirin mishiyikdash b'kli. But if it's a davar she'ein la matirin, which is also mechoyev in tuma, it's as soon as it became hokdash in a kli. So Ashkan tuma. So we found legabe tuma that it's even by davar she'ein la matirin noiser minal. And how do we know noiser also has going to have this din? So we learn it out as gzeir shav from tuma. In fact, the marvel of oven mit pegel. Why are we learning from tuma that it doesn't require davar sheyesh lo matirin? And let's learn from pigel that it does require that it have be a davar sheyesh lo matirin, just like pigel. We have a gzeira shava like we saw on the previous blot on this as well. So there is more relationship or more of a similarity from between noiser and tuma shechein gazal. Rashi explains shechein gazal simin noiser v'tuma psul haguf. So the first thing is that noiser and tuma are things that there's a psul in the actual carbon. Masha ein kain pigel is just a machshava, and that's the gimel. And the zayin is noiser v'tuma ein zrikas adam mevi only de psul. Pigel zrikas adam kvuasa b'psul. You need the avodas adam to make pigel, which you don't need for noiser and tuma. And finally, noiser v'tuma nema b'hen chilul. They have the word chilul, which does not exist by pigel. So tomorrow,
what's the lamed?
What?
What's the lamed?
It's chilul.
Chilul. What do you bother? The chilul is the lamed. There's two lameds. Sounds like a lamed. It's a siman.
All right.
Yeah, kasha on a siman. Listen, my son was learning Gemara about Peh, and he did that first blot of Elul Metzias, which has the simanim for all the different rayas about Yishalem Midas. And like half of them didn't work out. And it took him 45 minutes to explain to me how each letter was really the right siman. And so I'm burnt out on this topic a little bit. I thought I was going to take 5 minutes instead of turn to a 40-minute job of listening to the blog.
That's when kids want to derech
From the simanim. Okay, so what about the other way? Other Rabbi Pigel have a little melech. You could learn out the other way and shechein hutar. So you have to look at Rashi because Rashi has a little bit different shechein hutar. So Rashi explains what all these things. Hutar tzitz tar bizman karav. So the first one, noiser pigel loy chutru miklalim b'tuma. Ketuma tuma is chutru b'klalis. That's the first thing that's more similar of noiser and pigel. Ve'ena tzitz meratza alayu ketuma. Tuma is tzitz meratza. Yeah, okay, we'll skip that. Tar shnei and tahirin. Masha'ein tuma is obviously tamei and it has other dinim of tuma. Which name is son bizman. Zeb noiser chutzazan. Zeb machshevesman. Both noiser and pigel have to do with being left over. And shnei psulim b'karav lafuke tuma hasaguf shepsulim b'makrav. Both of them are in the thing that's being nikrav as opposed to tumas haguf, where the psul is in the person. Says Gemara, v'hani nefishin. So there's more similarities between tuma and pigel than tuma and noiser. So why are we choosing to learn out noiser from tamei to say that it could even be bought by a davar she'en lematirin? El matani levi, the tani levi. Nine she'af psul zman hakasam medaber. How do we know that even by psul zman, meaning noiser, it means it was left over? Tamiloim v'lo yechalu. It says lo yechalu with two lameds, so it said in the actual pasuk it also references not just tuma but also noiser. Okay, we're going to stop over here.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Shkayach.